Yes, welcome back. It is too hot to do anything, but I like to continue. I like to continue my life, even it's like 33 degrees. Now I'm going to sneezing, I think. Just so that's a little too hot. I'm not feeling bad, but I'm not feeling well. I just took a break and make a Danish video. So problem is it's so hot and this heating makes me very sleepy. I'm very sleepy when I wake up in the morning. Every day I'm very sleepy. Cause it's very hot in my apartment and I not sleep enough. Never sleep enough. So I'm very sleepy in the morning and then it's like 32 degrees hot, make me even more sleepy. Then I click my mouse. When I do this click, the auto reading stops. And that's because I'm close to fall asleep. Yes, when I'm close to fall asleep, then my hands fall on my mouse and click. But that's because I cannot stay awake because it's so hot. So this is why I did need to take a break. So probably I would keep doing it because it's too hot, but cannot go to sleep now because it's only it's not even 4 p.m. If I sleep now, I cannot sleep tonight. So we cannot sleep now.
Tensions between Japan and the West. As early as 1935, Japanese military strategists had concluded the Dutch East Indies were, because of their oil reserves, important to Japan. By 1940 they had expanded this to include Indochina, Malaya, and the Philippines within their concept of the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. Japanese troop build-ups in Hainan, Taiwan, and Haiphong were noted. IJA officers were openly talking about war, and Admiral Sankichi Takahashi was reported as saying a showdown with the US was necessary. 68. In an effort to discourage Japanese militarism, Western powers including Australia, the US, Britain, and the Dutch government in exile, which controlled the Dutch East Indies, stopped selling oil, iron ore, and steel to Japan. In Japan, the government and nationalists viewed these embargoes as acts of aggression. Imported oil made up about 80% of domestic consumption, without which Japan's economy would grind to a halt. The Japanese media, influenced by military propagandists, began to refer to the embargoes as the ABCD line, American, British, Chinese, Dutch, Japanese preparations. The Japanese Imperial General Headquarters, GHQ, began planning for a war with the Western powers in April or May 1941. Japan increased its naval budget as well as putting large formations of the Army and its attached Air Force under Navy command. While formerly the IJA consumed the lion's share of the state's military budget, with a 73/27 split in 1940. From 1942 to 1945 there would instead be a roughly 60/40 split in funds between the Army and the Navy. 71. Japan's key initial objective was to seize economic resources in the Dutch East Indies and Malaya to escape the effects of the Allied embargo. 72. This was known as the Southern Plan. It was decided because of the close relationship between the UK and the US. 73, 74, and, mistaken, 73, belief that the US would inevitably become involved, that Japan would also take the Philippines, Wake and Guam. Japanese planning was for a limited war where Japan would seize key objectives and then establish a defensive perimeter to defeat Allied counterattacks, which in turn would lead to a negotiated peace. 75. The yearly war was divided into two operational phases. The first operational phase was further divided into three separate parts in which the major objectives of the Philippines, British Malaya, Borneo, Burma Rabaul and the Dutch East Indies would be occupied. The second operational phase called for further expansion into the South Pacific by seizing eastern New Guinea, New Britain, Fiji, Samoa, and strategic points in the Australian area. In the Central Pacific, Midway was targeted as were the Aleutian Islands in the North Pacific. Seizure of these key areas would provide defensive depth and deny the Allies staging areas from which to mount a counter-offensive. 75. By November these plans were essentially complete, and were modified only slightly over the next month. Japanese military planners' expectation of success rested on the United Kingdom and the Soviet Union being unable to effectively respond to a Japanese attack because of the threat posed to each by Germany. The Soviet Union was even seen as unlikely to commence hostilities. The Japanese leadership was aware that a total military victory in a traditional sense against the US was impossible. The alternative would be negotiating for peace after their initial victories, which would recognize Japanese hegemony in Asia. 76. Japanese offensives, 1941-42. Following prolonged tensions between Japan and the Western powers, units of the IJN and IJA launched simultaneous surprise attacks on the United States and the British Empire on the 7th of December, the 8th of December in Asia/West Pacific time zones. The locations of this first wave of Japanese attacks included the American territories of Hawaii, the Philippines, Guam, and Wake Island and the British territories of Malaya, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Concurrently, Japanese forces invaded southern and eastern Thailand and were resisted for several hours, before the Thai government signed an armistice and entered an alliance with Japan. Although Japan declared war on the United States and the British Empire, the declaration was not delivered until after the attacks began. Attack on Pearl Harbor. USS Arizona burned for 2 days after being hit by a Japanese bomb in the attack on Pearl Harbor. In the early hours of the 7th of December, Hawaiian time, Japan launched a major surprise carrier-based airstrike on Pearl Harbor in Honolulu without explicit warning, which crippled the U.S. Pacific Fleet, left 8 American battleships out of action, destroyed 188 American aircraft, and killed 2,403 Americans. 77. The Japanese had gambletted the Americans, faced with such a sudden and massive blow would agree to a negotiated settlement. This gamble did not pay off. American losses were less serious than initially thought. The 3 American aircraft carriers were at sea, and vital naval infrastructure, submarine base, and signals intelligence units were unscathed, and in fact the bombing happened while the US was not officially at war, caused a wave of outrage across the US. 77. Japan's fallback strategy, relying on a war of attrition, was beyond the IJN's capabilities. 73. 78. Opposition to war in the US vanished after the attack. On the 8th of December, the United Kingdom, H. 79, the United States, I. 80, Canada, 81, and the Netherlands, 82, declared war on Japan, followed by China, 83, and Australia, 84, the next day. 4 days after Pearl Harbor, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States, drawing the country into a two-theater war. This is widely agreed to be a grand strategic blunder. Southeast Asian campaigns of 1941-42. Thailand, with its territory already serving as a springboard for the Malayan campaign, surrendered within hours of the Japanese invasion. 85. The government of Thailand formally allied with Japan on 21 December. To the south, the IJA had seized the British colony of Penang on the 19th of December, encountering little resistance. 86. Hong Kong was attacked on the 8th of December and fell on the 25th of December, 1941. American bases on Guam and Wake Island were lost at around the same time. British, Australian, and Dutch forces, already drained of personnel and material by 2 years of war with Germany, and heavily committed in the Middle East, North Africa, and elsewhere, were unable to provide much more than token resistance. 2 major British warships, the battlecruiser HMS Repulse and the battleship HMS Prince of Wales, were sunk by a Japanese sea air attack off Malaya on the 10th of December 1941. 87. Following the declaration by United Nations on the 1st of January 1942, the Allied governments appointed the British General Archibald Wavell to the American British-Dutch-Australian Command, ABDACOM, a supreme command for Allied forces in Southeast Asia. This gave Wavell nominal control of a huge force. Albeit thinly spread from Burma to the Philippines to northern Australia. Other areas, including India, Hawaii, and the rest of Australia, remained under local commands. On the 15th of January, Wavell moved to Bandung in Java to assume control of ABDACOM. British forces surrender Singapore to Japanese. February 1942. In January, Japan invaded British Burma, the Dutch East Indies, New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, and captured Manila, Kuala Lumpur and Rabaul. After being driven out of Malaya, Allied forces in Singapore attempted to resist the Japanese during the Battle of Singapore, but were forced to surrender to the Japanese on 15 February 1942. About 130,000 Indian, British, Australian and Dutch personnel became prisoners of war. 88. The pace of conquest was rapid. Bali and Timor fell in February. 89. 90. The rapid collapse of Allied resistance left the Abdar area split in two. Wavell resigned from ABDACOM on the 25th of February, handing control of the Abdar area to local commanders and returning to the post of Commander-in-Chief, India. The bombing of Darwin, Australia, 19 February 1942. Meanwhile, Japanese aircraft had all but eliminated Allied air power in Southeast Asia and were making air attacks on northern Australia, beginning with a psychologically devastating but militarily insignificant bombing of the city of Darwin on 19 February, which killed at least 243 people. 91. At the Battle of the Java Sea in late February and early March, the IJN inflicted a resounding defeat on the main Abdar naval force under Admiral Karl Doorman. 92. The Dutch East Indies campaign subsequently ended with the surrender of Allied forces on Java and Sumatra. 93. 94. In March and April, a powerful IJN carrier force launched a raid into the Indian Ocean. British Royal Navy bases in Ceylon were hit and the aircraft carrier HMS Hermes and other Allied ships were sunk. The attack forced the Royal Navy to withdraw to the western part of the Indian Ocean. 95. Paving the way for a Japanese assault on Burma and India. In Burma, the Japanese captured Mole Main on the 31st of January 1942, and then drove outnumbered British and Indian troops towards the Sitang River. On the 23rd of February, a bridge over the river was demolished prematurely, stranding most of an Indian division. On the 8th of March, the Japanese occupied Rangoon. The Allies then tried to defend central Burma, with Indian and Burmese divisions holding the Irrawaddy River Valley and the Chinese Expeditionary Force in Burma defending Taungoo. On the 16th of April, 7,000 British soldiers were encircled by the Japanese 33rd Division during the Battle of Yinjiang and rescued by the Chinese 38th Division, led by Sun Lijian. 96. Meanwhile, in the Battle of Yunnan-Burma Road, the Japanese captured Taungoo after a severe battle and sent motorized units to capture Lashio. This cut the Burma Road, which was the Western Allies' supply line to the Chinese nationalists. Many of the Chinese troops were forced either to retreat to India or in small parties to Yunnan. Accompanied by large numbers of civilian refugees, the British retreated to Imphal in Manipur, abandoning most of their transport and equipment. They reached Imphal in May just as the monsoon descended, which halted operations.